Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me.
Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So persecution, something that is very painful, or can be very painful and difficult, that God can turn into a positive. Only God can take a negative thing like that and turn it into a positive, because he has a different view than we typically do about persecution. When we feel the sting of an insult or somebody talking bad about us or rejecting us or even physically harming us, which doesn't happen a lot in the West, but it could happen, because of our faith, because of how we take our stand in Jesus, those things could happen and they can be painful. But God just basically says, hey, that means you're doing something right. It means you're doing something good, because it will happen to true believers. And persecution is something that God allows in order for the true believers and the false believers to be separated, to be sifted out. Of course, when we're persecuted, it shouldn't be for stuff that we're just being stupid about, but they should be something that we are actually standing in truth for, in righteousness. And it truly can be a pathway for our own transformation, our own character transformation. I think of, like, for example, if we get good at turning the other cheek when we're insulted or talked about, then that means that our character is being transformed to be more like Jesus. That's a good thing. And so our attitude about persecution, in my opinion, should be to welcome it, to expect it. Jesus said, woe is it when all men speak well of you. So if everybody speaks well of you and everybody has the greatest opinion of you, then that may not be such a good thing. And if we consider persecution, when we get it, a commendation or an attaboy for our faith, then that means that, hey, we're doing something right. And finally,
as we think about those who are persecuted for righteousness, and especially as we watch the video in a minute about the kind of persecuted church, many of us will sort of say, well, that's over there, that's them, that's their situation, and obviously we'll pray for them, we'll give, we'll support them, but it's not really relevant for today here in Scotland. But what I would sort of say is that I think in the next maybe few years, maybe 10, 15, 20 years, I wouldn't be surprised at all if people who were followers of Jesus were actually persecuted for their faith in Scotland. And that might seem a strange thing to say, but actually there's a bill that's going through the Scottish Parliament at the moment, which is to do with hate speech. But essentially the kind of issue for us as Christians is that potentially it's going to actually say, we cannot say, for example, that Jesus is the only way to God. We cannot say that his teachings are unique. We can't say necessarily that the moral standards that are taught within the Bible should be talked about or shared. And in particular, we can't say that we disagree with other folks. In other words, we can't say potentially that we disagree with people from other faiths about, again, Jesus being the only way to God. Now, to be very, very clear with everybody who's hearing this, I'm not for hate speech, and I'm not wanting to persecute or in any way diminish the beliefs or values held by anyone else. But we do hold different views, and we do hold different beliefs. And actually, there is a balance in this which is to do with freedom of speech and the ability to be able to respectfully and honourably engage in a conversation with people who hold different views without actually in any way diminishing the other person. So it's really important that we don't in any way encourage hate speech, but at the same time I think there is a possibility that actually increasingly in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years in Scotland, people who are followers of Christ and who hold to the Bible's teachings around simple things like whether or not Jesus is the only way to God may actually find themselves in real difficulty, may find themselves actually being persecuted and prosecuted because of the laws that are kind of coming in just now. It's an interesting time, a challenging time. It's one which actually we need great wisdom for, and it's something that we need to kind of keep praying about. And so if you are listening to this today, the bill actually kind of is being voted on in the next couple of weeks, and it would be great if you got involved by getting in touch with your MSP to encourage them to actually allow Christians to be, and other folks of other faiths and none, to be able to express their views without feeling that they're going to be criminalised for doing so in an honourable and respectful way, not through hate. So, interesting times and interesting teaching from Jesus.
What if your church had to meet in secret? What if spies watched your every move? What if following Jesus meant you faced violence, or even death? Millions of Christians around the world experience these kinds of challenges every day. And these are the top 10 countries where faith costs the most. Number 10, India. Hindu extremists want to rid India of Christians, and they are prepared to use extreme violence to achieve their goal. At number 9, Nigeria, where more Christians are murdered for their faith than in any other country in the world. Iran is at number 8. Secret house churches risk being raided by the police. If caught, be prepared for a long prison sentence. Number 7, Yemen, a war-torn country where Christians, if discovered, face the death penalty. Eritrea is at number 6. If your faith is discovered, you can be imprisoned without trial in appalling conditions. Often, your loved ones don't even know if you're still alive. Number 5, Pakistan. Say the wrong thing in Pakistan, and the notorious blasphemy laws could see you accused of insulting Islam and sentenced to death. At number 4 is Libya, a lawless land with no freedom of speech or belief. Somalia is number 3 on the list. Somali Christians can't reveal their faith to anyone, or they could be killed, even by their own families. Number 2 is Afghanistan. If they find out you're a Christian, you have a stark choice: flee the country or be killed. And at number 1, North Korea, the most dangerous place in the world to be a Christian. Informants are everywhere. Discovery means death, either by execution or by being worked to death in a labour camp. At least 340 million Christians around the world experience high levels of persecution and discrimination. What if you could help them? For 65 years, Open Doors has stood alongside the persecuted church, strengthening Christians who dare to follow Jesus, no matter the cost. Your prayers and gifts enable our underground networks to reach millions of Christians with emergency food and aid, spiritual care, smuggled Bibles and Christian books, training and legal advice. But more than that, your support means that persecuted Christians know that they are not forgotten, not alone. After all, these are not strangers, and they are not statistics. They are our brothers and sisters, and they need our help.
So my final wee thought about persecution can be summed up like this. The devil sends persecution to discourage us and to get us off track. But God allows persecution to refine us and consider it as a pat on the back.
This is how I fight my battles. 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 It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. This is how I fight my battles. 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 It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. Rock of ages, cleft for me. Let me hide. Let me hide. Rock of ages, cleft for me. Let me hide. Let me hide. Let me hide myself in thee. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight